Chapter 10. Tying Loose Ends. Olivia stood outside the cafe, her heart racing as she stared through the window at Mark. He sat at a table in the corner, his head bowed, hands cradling a cup of coffee. This was it, the moment she had been dreading and avoiding. The message she had received from him still lingered in her mind. Can we talk? Just once. She owed him that, she knew. But her heart, torn between what they once had and the raw passion that burned with Alex, was heavy. With a deep breath, she stepped inside. The bell above the door chimed softly, but Mark didn't look up. It was only when she neared the table that his eyes found hers, and in them, she saw the echoes of everything they'd been through. "Olivia," he said quietly, standing as if the weight of her presence was too much to bear, while sitting. "Thank you for coming." She nodded, feeling the awkwardness settle in. She gestured for him to sit back down, taking the seat opposite him. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The clinking of cups, murmured conversations, and soft jazz music filled the silence between them. "You wanted to talk," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Mark exhaled, running a hand through his hair. He looked tired, emotionally worn. "I don't know where to start," he admitted, his eyes flickering over her face. "I've replayed everything in my mind 100 times since we last saw each other, and none of it makes sense." Olivia bit her lip. "Mark, No, please, let me say this." His voice trembled slightly, but he steadied himself. "I know we fell apart, and I know some of that is my fault. But I need to know, was it all a mistake? Did what we have even mean anything?" His question hit her like a punch to the gut. She hadn't anticipated this level of vulnerability from him. The anger and frustration she had expected were absent, leaving only raw emotion in their wake. "It wasn't a mistake," she whispered, her heart aching for him. "What we had, it meant something. But Mark, it's over. We can't go back." He nodded, though the pain was evident in his eyes. "I know, but it's hard to accept. I've been trying to figure out where we went wrong, trying to understand how you could just move on." Olivia felt the weight of his words, but she couldn't lie to him. Not now. "It wasn't easy, Mark, and I haven't just moved on. This has been hard for me too, but sometimes things just don't work out, no matter how much we want them to." Mark's gaze dropped to the table, and for a moment, he didn't speak. When he looked up again, his eyes were clouded with something darker. "Is it him? Alex?" Her breath caught in her throat. She had been expecting this. The unspoken tension between Alex and Mark had always been there, simmering beneath the surface, even when things were good with Mark. "Yes," she said softly, the admission hanging between them like a final thread being severed. Mark leaned back in his chair, exhaling a shaky breath. "I knew it. I could feel it when I saw you two together. It's always been him, hasn't it?" Olivia shook her head. "No, Mark, it wasn't like that. I cared about you, I really did. But with Alex, it's different. I can't explain it." "I don't need you to explain," he said, his voice heavy with defeat. "I can see it now." They both sat in silence, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on them. Olivia reached out across the table, her hand resting on his. "Mark, I didn't want to hurt you. I never wanted this to happen." "I know," he said, his fingers curling around hers. "I don't blame you, but it doesn't make it any easier." She nodded, her chest tight with emotion. This was the closure they both needed. but it didn't make the goodbye any less painful. She could see the hurt in his eyes, and it made her heart ache for him, for the man she had once loved. But she knew, deep down, that her heart no longer belonged to him. It belonged to Alex. Mark released her hand, sitting back with a resigned sigh. "I guess this is it then." Olivia swallowed hard, nodding. "Yeah, I guess it is." As she stood to leave, she hesitated, looking down at him one last time. "You'll be okay, Mark." He gave her a sad smile, the kind that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Yeah, I'll be okay. Eventually." With that, she turned and walked out of the cafe, the weight of the moment pressing on her chest. But as the cool air hit her face, she felt a sense of relief wash over her. It was done. But as she walked away, her phone buzzed in her pocket. Alex. Chapter 11. The Breaking Point. Olivia closed the door behind her with a soft click, her heart still pounding from the emotional weight of her meeting with Mark. She leaned against the door, eyes closed, trying to steady herself. It was over. Truly over. But the conversation still lingered in her mind, leaving her feeling both relieved and emotionally drained. "Olivia?" She opened her eyes to see Alex standing in the kitchen doorway, his arms crossed over his chest. There was a tension in his posture that hadn't been there before, and it made her stomach twist. She could feel it. The unspoken questions, the worry that had been simmering beneath the surface. "I'm back," she said softly, walking toward him, but his expression didn't soften. He wasn't angry, not yet, but there was something darker brewing in his eyes. "How did it go?" Alex asked, his voice calm but tight. Olivia hesitated for a moment. "It went as expected. We talked. I said what needed to be said." Alex's jaw clenched, his hands gripping the countertop behind him. "And how does he feel about it?" "Alex, it's not about him," Olivia said, taking a step closer. "It's over with Mark." "Yeah, I get that. But that doesn't mean it doesn't bother me," Alex snapped, his eyes flashing with something she hadn't seen in a while. Jealousy. She stopped in her tracks, her heart skipping a beat. "What do you mean?" He shook his head, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "I'm happy it's over, Olivia. Really. But I hate the thought of you being with him, of what you had together." Olivia's breath hitched. "That's in the past, Alex." "Is it?" His voice was rising now, his emotions spilling over. "Because you just spent God knows how long talking to him, and here I am, wondering if you're still thinking about him." "Alex," Olivia said firmly, trying to keep her own emotions in check. "I went to get closure. It was the right thing to do." "And what about us?" he shot back. "Where does that leave us?" She felt a flash of frustration surge through her. "You're the one I want, Alex. Why can't you see that?" "Then why does it feel like you're still halfway out the door?" His words cut deep, and Olivia felt a mix of anger and sadness rise in her chest. "That's not fair," she said, her voice shaking. "I'm here with you, aren't I?" Alex let out a bitter laugh, his eyes narrowing. "But are you really with me? Or is part of you still stuck in the past?" Olivia felt something snap inside her. "I'm not the one who's stuck in the past, Alex. You're the one who keeps bringing it up." They stood there, staring at each other, the air between them thick with tension. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, her pulse racing. She could see the hurt in his eyes, the fear of losing her, and it only fueled her own emotions. "You think I don't want this?" she asked, her voice trembling with frustration. You think I don't want you? Then prove it, he said, his voice low, daring her. Without thinking, Olivia closed the distance between them in an instant. She grabbed the front of his shirt, pulling him toward her, with a force she didn't know she had. Their lips collided in a fiery kiss, full of all the anger, passion, and desire they had been holding back for so long. Alex responded immediately, his hands gripping her waist as he backed her up against the wall. Their bodies pressed together, the heat between them undeniable. The kiss was raw, desperate, neither of them holding back. It was like a dam had broken, all the frustration and longing pouring out in one intense, heated moment. Olivia's fingers tangled in his hair, pulling him closer, as if she couldn't get enough. His hands slid down to her hips, pulling her against him with a possessive grip that sent a shiver down her spine. Is this what you wanted? He murmured against her lips, his voice rough and breathless. She pulled back just enough to look him in the eye, her heart racing. Yes, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. This is what I want. You're what I want. His eyes darkened with desire, and before she could say anything more, he kissed her again. This time slower, deeper, like he was claiming her. Every kiss, every touch was filled with an intensity that left her breathless, as if they were finally letting go of all the barriers that had held them apart. Olivia felt herself melt into him, her body responding to his every touch, every kiss. It was like the world had fallen away, leaving just the two of them, lost in each other. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing heavily, their foreheads resting together. The anger, the jealousy, it had all melted away, leaving only the undeniable connection between them. I'm not going anywhere, Alex, Olivia said softly, her hands still resting on his chest. I'm yours. Alex's hand cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing lightly over her skin. And I'm yours, he whispered, his voice filled with emotion. For a long moment, they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, the tension between them finally broken. But the fire that had ignited wasn't going anywhere. It had only just begun. Chapter 12. More Than Words. The night had fallen quiet around them, the earlier storm of emotions and passion having settled into a peaceful, steady rhythm. Olivia lay in Alex's arms, her head resting against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart as their breathing slowed. The fire that had once burned between them was still there, but now it simmered, warm, gentle, comforting. For a while, neither of them said anything. It was as if the silence was its own kind of conversation, a way to hold on to the moment without shattering it with words. But in that quiet, Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that there was more that needed to be said, more that she hadn't yet admitted to herself, let alone to Alex. She lifted her head, her eyes searching his as she propped herself up on one elbow. Alex's gaze was soft, but there was something deeper there, something unreadable that made her heart skip a beat. What is it? He asked quietly, his hand reaching up to gently brush a strand of hair behind her ear. Olivia hesitated, feeling the weight of the moment. She wasn't sure how to say what she was feeling, how to put into words the intensity of what had happened between them, the way her heart ached at the thought of losing him, how she felt more connected to him than she had ever thought possible. I don't know how to explain this, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. But there's something about you, Alex, something that scares me, and yet I can't stay away. His eyes darkened, but he remained quiet, giving her space to speak, to work through her thoughts. "You've completely gotten under my skin," she continued, her voice growing stronger. "I tried to fight it, tried to push you away, but I don't want to anymore. I can't. You're not just some fleeting moment for me." Alex's hand tightened on her waist, his gaze locked on hers as he listened intently, his chest rising and falling with each breath. "I'm falling for you, Alex," she admitted, her heart pounding as the words left her lips. "I think I've been falling for you for a while now, and it scares me because I don't know what to do with these feelings, but I can't pretend they aren't real." For a moment, there was only silence between them. The air felt thick, heavy with everything left unsaid. Olivia could feel her pulse racing as she waited for his response, wondering if she had gone too far, if she had misread the connection between them. But then Alex smiled, soft, genuine, the kind of smile that made her heart melt. He reached up, cupping her face in his hands, his thumb gently brushing against her cheek. "Olivia," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I've been waiting for you to say that." Her breath caught in her throat as his words sank in. She hadn't expected him to be so open, so vulnerable. But there he was, looking at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. "I've wanted you for so long," Alex continued, his eyes searching hers. "But it's more than that. It's always been more than just wanting you. I didn't want to push you, didn't want to scare you off, but I'm falling for you too. Hard." A wave of relief and warmth washed over Olivia, and for the first time, she allowed herself to fully feel the weight of her emotions. They weren't just two people caught in a whirlwind of passion. They were something more, something real, something that could last. She leaned down, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that was soft, slow, and full of promise. This kiss wasn't about the heat or the desire that had burned so brightly between them before. It was about the quiet love that had been growing beneath the surface all along. When they pulled apart, Olivia rested her head back on his chest, her heart finally at ease. "Let's not rush this," she whispered. "I want to enjoy every moment with you." Alex wrapped his arms around her, holding her close as he pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "Neither do I," he said softly. "We have all the time in the world." And for the first time in a long time, Olivia believed him.